All right, all right, all right. Welcome to Pro Football First 50 Years, where we take the past and we bring it back to life. Now, you can go online, and I'm strictly talking just the first 50 years, from 1920 to 1970. And especially if you go back to like the 20s and the 30s, you can go online and find obviously the score of the game, who won, who lost, the box score, maybe who scored a touchdown, how far a field goal was, what the attendance was for the game, where the game was played at. They can maybe even find the starting lineups for each team. But exactly what happened during the game? Well, thanks to old newspaper articles, we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each and every game during the first 50 years of professional football. Now, a little news flash here for you. Ain't no fancy videos here or nothing like that. All there is you. You. It's 3D coming at you. You and me for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So if that's all right with you, let's get it on. And today's game, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. November 26, 1959, Briggs Stadium, which was first Navin Field, went to Briggs Stadium and Tiger Stadium. Did you get that? The Green Bay Packers at the Detroit Lions, Briggs Stadium, Thanksgiving Day, November 26, 1959. Now, for the Green Bay Packers, we only got between both these teams. Each team only had 3 games left. Obviously, after this game, there was only a 12-game schedule. So after this game, for each team, there's only 2 games left. The Packers, spoiler alert, would win this game and even out the record of 5-5. For the Detroit Lions, oh, how the mighty have fallen. This season could not end quick enough. And in one of these articles, we're gonna read a little bit about, got some problems going on there. Because you look at the Lions in 1957, they won the championship. And not only did they win the championship, they won the championship. 59-14, they beat the Browns. Here it is 2 years later, and they're one of the worst teams in football. Houston, we got ourselves a problem. And not only that, but, after this game was over with, the Lions had actually far less wins than the Green Bay Packers, who the year before were 1-10-1. So the Packers, who were 1-10-1, their stock is going up. The Detroit Lions, who 2 years ago, probably 57, were the champions of the world, they're like plummeting into the abyss. So each team's going in totally different directions here. So let's take a look here at each team's schedule. All right, here we go. And we'll start off with the Packers here. Now, the Packers, very, very streaky team. Now, once again, you got to bear with me here. Just bear with me. If you include the final 2 games of preseason, just bear with me. I know it's just preseason, but once again, humor me. They would win 5 games in a row. The final 2 of preseason, they won the first 3 games of the regular season. After the first 3 weeks of the season, 1959, the Green Bay Packers, who were 1-10-1 at 58, no big surprise. Some guy by the name of Vince Lombardi came over and was the head coach. But after the first 3 weeks, they were the only team in professional football to be undefeated. After that, they lost 5 games in a row. So they went from 3-0 to 3-5. But something funny happened along the way. Their starting quarterback, Lamar McCain, who actually, I don't really know much about him at all, but actually, for the most part, a lengthy football career. He played quite a few games at quarterback for a few different teams. He started off the season for the Green Bay Packers. Vince Lombardi thought he had the most experience, certainly. So he started off, but he got injured, and in stepped. It's kind of like the Wally Pipp, Lou Gehrig kind of thing. Wally Pipp had a bad headache, is what I was reading up on. In stepped Lou Gehrig, And the rest is history. So Lamar McCann got injured. In stepped Bart Starr, and he wasn't like Mr. Phenomenal right off the bat. He was throwing some interceptions. He had some issues, but Bart Starr would be the quarterback for the final 5 games of the season for the Packers. They lost a close one at home to the Colts. Then they would win their final 4 games of the season to finish the regular season at 7-5. I mean, if you're 110-1 the year before, and you go from 110-1 to 7-5, I mean, that's a fantastic season. Not only that, I mean, once again, it was just, then the 1960, they go into the championship game, 61-62. They won the championship. 63, they lost out, to a really good Bears team. A really good defensive Bears team, shall we say. So, I mean, things were really looking up. But not so much for the Detroit Lions here. As we see, I mean, there's a they did pretty well. Actually, they were one of the few teams actually have only 7 exhibition preseason games, whatever you want to call them. 7. We got 3 nowadays, but they had the Redskins, the Browns, the Eagles, the Giants, the Browns, the Cardinals, and the Rams. But you'll see here, once the regular season started, I mean, you see a lot of L's here. And actually, even after this game was over, they still only had 2 wins. After this game was over, the Packers had 5, and the Lions, who were champions 2 years ago, had 2 wins. They would win the next week against the Cardinals to give them their 3rd and final win of the season. The only team that was really worse than them in their conference, the Western Conference, was the Rams, who only wound up with 2 wins. And it's, really how the mighty have fallen, because you figure from 1950 to 1957, with the exception of 1956, the only 2 teams from the Western Conference that would go to the championship game, I said, with the exception of 1956, was the Rams and the Lions. And here it is, the end of the 1950s, and the Rams and the Lions were like the worst 2 teams in the Western Conference. So, I mean, as you can see, I mean, they lost a lot of games. I mean, they started off the season 0-4. Then they won a game, then they lost a game, then they tied a game. So things were not good at all there. As I said, spoiler alert here. Thanksgiving, the Packers would wind up winning this one 24-17. Now, it was played at Briggs Stadium, which changed its name over as time went on. It was first called Navin Field after we're going to read a little something about it. And interestingly, the Detroit Panthers, who were part of the NFL in 1925 and 1926, played at Navin Field. And interestingly, they were like, I don't know. I have to go back and look at the articles I had. They were within like 5, 6 minutes, 7 minutes or so of actually winning the Detroit Panthers. I'm talking about 1925. Let me share the screen. 1925 Detroit Panthers. They were within like 5 or 6 minutes of winning the championship. Because back in the day, there were no championship games. All it was the team with the best overall winning percentage at the end of the season. And they were 8-2-2. 8-2-2, 1925. Although they didn't have they were not beating like the best of the best teams, shall we say. They did beat, now I'll try to make this real fast. I do apologize for getting going off on a little tantrum on the side here, but I mean, they did not really beat. Now, yes, they beat the Bears here 21-0. However, when they played the Bears here, the Detroit Panthers in 1925, this was the 6th game in 8 days that the Bears played. 6 games in 8 days. Yes, you heard it right. And in fact, the Chicago Bears would play a game. They would play the Giants the following day, Sunday, December 13th. So after that game, the Bears against the Giants on December 13th, 1925, the Bears would play, I believe it was 7 games in 9 days. So the Panthers beat the Bears, but the Bears were just, I could have probably beaten them. They were so beat up. But you see here, they beat the Rochester Jeffersons, who were not very good. They lost to the Bears when the Bears were and this was without Red Grange. They lost to the Bears. They beat the Bulldogs, who weren't a bad team. They beat the Badgers, who were not very good. They beat the Hammond Pros, who were not very good. They tied the Akron Pros, who were okay, but they tied them. They beat the Dayton Triangles, who were not very good. They did squeak out a game against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. However, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets the day before played a game. So the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played a game on Saturday. Then they went from Frankfurt, Philadelphia, all the way to Detroit. And Detroit only beat them 3-0. Then they tied the Bears 0-0, and they beat the Columbus Tigers only 7-0. And actually, you can see here the Detroit team only played 1 game on the road all season. So they didn't really play, but phenomenal, tough schedule. But my point was this game right here, they lost to the Rock Island Independence. The Detroit Panthers were winning 3-0 going late into the fourth quarter. I can't remember how many. I'd have to go back and look at the newspaper articles that I have. But the Rock Island Independence, who were not a bad team. As you see here, 5-2-3. They were not a bad team at all. Scored with about 5 or 6 minutes to go in the game. Detroit was winning 3-0. Had Detroit held on and not given up a touchdown and say that Detroit won, Detroit would have been 9-1-2. They would have had a winning percentage of 900, and they would have been champions of the 1925 football season. But once again, it was not meant to be. But however, if you'll see here, you notice here, right? The Detroit Panthers played at home, and it was at Navin Field, which is Navin Field went to Briggs Stadium, which went to Tiger Stadium. You get that? So let's we'll go over a little bit of Briggs Stadium, Tiger Stadium, Navin Field, whatever you want to call it. A little bit of history. All right, let's see here. So is that right? Nope. Of this. There we go. I'll try this. Try this here. I like this. This is a good one here. Tiger Stadium. Perhaps one of the most popular stadiums in baseball history. Tiger Stadium was the home of the Detroit Tigers for nearly a century, located at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull Avenues. Baseball was first played at this location in 1896. Wow. All right. The ballpark was expanded several times over the next decade, but was primarily built of wood and began to deteriorate. Yeah, imagine that, right? This led to the entire ballpark being demolished after the 1911 season. A new ballpark of steel and concrete was constructed on the same site. Home plate was moved from right field to the location where it is until Tiger Stadium was closed. On April 20th, 1912, the Detroit Tigers played their first game at the new ballpark named Navin Field, after the club's owner, Frank Navin. It could seat 23,000 spectators. As a covered grandstand extended down the first and third base lines with bleachers in right field. In center field was the first baseball hitter's backdrop in baseball. Right, with the backdrop, so when a pitcher throws the ball, you can actually see the ball come. Makes it a lot better for a little bit easier for the hitters to pick up the ball as it's coming out of the pitcher's hand. But the first major addition to Navin Field occurred before the 1923 season, when a second deck was added between the first and third base, and a press box was added on top of the roof. This addition increased the capacity at Navin Field, rose to 30,000 fans, which back then was a pretty big stadium. Not the biggest, but it was not bad at all. Right. The 1930s expansion project gave Tiger Stadium its looks that retained for 70 years. In 1935, Navin Field was renamed Briggs Stadium after owner Walter O. Briggs. And that's where the line, this game would be played at that I'm going to talk about, Briggs. Although the 1930 to 1933, they were called the Portsmouth Spartans. In 1934, they became the Detroit Lions. However, 1934 to 1937, they Detroit University Stadium, I think it was called. That's where they played the games at. So they didn't start playing in Briggs Stadium until 1938. A series of expansions began prior to the 1936 season that included adding a second deck to the single-deck pavilion that extended down the first baseline around in the right field. So, construction was completed by April, and Briggs Stadium could seat 36,000 fans. Following season, the single-deck pavilion that extended down the third baseline and around into the left field was double-decked. So Briggs Stadium was now enclosed in a capacity of 54,500, making one of baseball's largest stadiums. And it was. 440 feet, the dead center field. They don't do that nowadays. They try to make it look cute, everything kind of cutie and all of that, so guys can hit all kinds of home runs and stuff. But back then, some of these stadiums actually had the deep center, big field. Let's see here. Throughout its history, the stadium hosted many other events other than baseball. The Detroit Lions and other football teams played at the ballpark from 1938 to 1974. So 1938, okay, to 1960, I think it was. It was named Briggs Stadium. 1961, it changed its name to Tiger Stadium, and the Detroit Lions were at Tiger Stadium from 1961 to 1974. 1975, they became, a powder puff team, and they moved indoors on unofficial turf, and they played in the Silver Dome. Bunch of pansies, absolute pain. Footballs, once again, forgive me, I'm an old-time fart, as you can tell. Football should be played outdoors in the elements on grass. If you're on artificial turf where everything looks real pretty, you don't want nobody getting dirty or nothing like that, and it's in a dome stadium, all that, you're a pack of pansies. That's all there is to it. You go outside in some place like Detroit and you move indoors, you're a pack of pansies. No. I apologize. So they were there for quite some time, from 1938 to 1974. We got some pictures here. Show you where we at here. All right, here we go. Here's actually, this is funny. Is I guess there may be a fax book. Press, radio, and TV vows of the Detroit Lions, 1959. Right, the season we're talking about. Here's here we go. Who remembers when the Lions played at Briggs Stadium, which is Tiger Stadium? You don't really know exactly what year this is here, but you can tell, right? The one went from first base was one end zone all the way out to left field. I guess it's the outside of it, Briggs Stadium. Go Lions, right? Once again, you got like one end zone down here on by first base, and the other one's all the way down here. But you just see, to me, once again, this you can't. This is just, I love it, absolutely love it. The way these old ballparks are, man, love it. Here's a color picture. Not sure if it's the actual or if somebody actually colored it, but Lions game versus an unidentified visiting team at Briggs Stadium, Tiger Stadium, circa 1959 to 61. Unidentified team. No, it's not going to let me do it, is it? You're going to keep. No. You don't have no emblems on the helmet. Interesting. But Let's see here. Now this is not 1959 because that's Bobby Lane there, and Bobby Lane wasn't on the team. I do believe that was Bobby Lane. Plus, also I know that the Lions did not host the Browns, so this is probably more like the '57 championship game, if I'm going to guess. This is not 1959. Somebody made a boo boo. Let's see. There's a goal. Wow, who remembers when Briggs Stadium? I don't know when the heck this was. I mean, if in fact this is Briggs Stadium. Well, see, that Lions Thanksgiving Day game has its roots right here on campus, University of Detroit. That's where the Lions played from 1934 until 1937. And as a matter of fact, the 1935 championship game was played at the University of Detroit Stadium, I believe it was called. So I'm not sure. Let's see here. Let's see. This right here. Detroit University of Detroit Mercy. I don't know. 1951. Nope. So possibly, I guess that this was the stadium that they played at. Although this picture was taken in 1951. Here's an interesting picture right here. Grounds crew making the lines for the Lions and setting up the goalposts, just like some metal pipes. It's like all it was, metal pipes. A day at Briggs Stadium in 1959. I mean, just, once again, you see, I mean, the stadium, pretty much almost all the stadiums were, what do you want to call it? Whatever you want to say, prisoners or whatever you want to call it, of, the architects of the city, how they built the streets. Say, I mean, there's a street here, there's a street here, and here's the stadium. I mean, they can't build out any farther. I mean, they can maybe obviously go up, but I mean, they can't make the stadium any bigger or anything like that because they got streets surrounding it. Let's see. All right. Detroit Lion crowd at Tiger Stadium, then Briggs Stadium, I guess. This might have been. You see the upper deck, and all of that. See, I guess you got some. Say there's a goalpost here. I don't know, that's an old Tiger Stadium. Is it Tiger Stadium here? Tiger Stadium. Just a beautiful ballpark. Absolutely beautiful. As I said, I mean, they can't put any stands out over here. If they did, they'd have to put some stands. You'd have to put stands here and it would cut into the field. So they got a street here. There's a street back here. There's a street here. Right? And there's a street here. So in between all of this, boom, boom, there's the ballpark. Right? I mean, just, to me, once again, I do apologize for me reminiscing and all this here. Briggs Stadium, Detroit for a Lions 49er game. Just, absolutely beautiful. But it was kind of the same thing. It was, it's like with the Packers. It got cold in Detroit. It got very, very cold. There's not a Briggs Stadium, Detroit for a Lions 49er game. Just very classic look. Outdoor, once again, it's outdoors in the elements, right, on grass. I mean, just, absolutely fantastic. Just, absolutely. It's a shame. I said that, some of the stadiums they have now, they're absolutely beautiful and all that and whatnot. But, I mean, you can't replace that kind of stuff. And I said what I can't stand is that they go from outdoors, and then everything's inside. It's all, you got to make everything look pretty. I absolutely freaking can't stand it. I absolutely love those stadiums. When I was growing up, in the early 70s, watching on TV, I was, whenever the Lions played, it was never pretty. Because but they had a tough defense. It was like especially the Bears with Butkus there going up against the Lions. Tough going, tough game. So let's go here, shall we? And let's see where we're going to go. To the Detroit Free Press, the November 27th, 1959 edition of the Detroit Free Press. Now, you got to remember sometimes also the day after Thanksgiving, possibly the Thanksgiving Day paper had some meat to it because everybody worked on Wednesday. They got their story in, and if everybody's working Wednesday, they get their stories in to the newspaper. The newspaper maybe's got some meat to it on Thursday. On Thanksgiving Day, you got a nice meaty paper. But if people are off on Thanksgiving, therefore Friday, the next day, the paper get a little bit thin. So sometimes, after Thanksgiving, you don't have fantastic coverage, shall we say. But I found a couple articles here that, they are not too bad. So let's go to the Detroit Free Press. There we go. And, some of these articles here, we'll see that there's a storm of brewing in Detroit, shall we say. Lions act like it's Christmas, and they lose 24-17. Packers get a gift on the wrong holiday. Early fumbles ruin us. They help Green Bay take a commanding 24-3 lead, and the Packers wind up holding on. Hopalong Cassidy, yes, glides over Hank Reminger, but Dan Curry finishes bringing him to earth. There's Hopalong. And we got Earl Morrall here. You ready for an Earl Morrall pitch out? Now, Earl Morrall, to me, possibly the best backup quarterback ever. He took 2 different teams to Super Bowls. Not too shabby. Of course, he didn't perform very well in Super Bowl III, but that year he was the MVP of the league. So, to me, he's the greatest backup quarterback of all time. All right, so we got, now you'll see here, right? You see what, Detroit had 21 first downs. The Packers only had 12. Packers had 73 yards rushing, which for them was really bad. The 190 yards rushing for the Lions, 164 yards passing. The Packers had 169. But they picked off 2 passes, and they lost 3 fumbles. So, our Lions heard old St. Nick was back in town Thursday, and so they rushed forth with the great gift of the Yule season. This most charitable of all football teams gave the Green Bay Packers a 24-17 victory, while 49,221 citizens who chose to pass up a Thanksgiving Day feast watch in chilled Briggs Stadium. It's the same old story, an echo of the past, a repetition of familiar Lion goofs. A rash of early fumbles caused them to fall behind 24-3 early in the second period. More errors killed their budding revival, left them with impressive yardage and no points in the second half, and sent them down to their 7th defeat in 10 games. So remember, they had a tie. So in 10 games, they were 2-7-1. This marks the first time since 1947 that Green Bay has whipped the Lions twice in the same season. But then almost everybody seems to be doing it this year. Quarterback Bart Starr is passing, rookie Boyd Dowler's receiving, and the running of Paul Hornung and some defensive weakness smartly exploited by the Packers got Green Bay 3 touchdowns and a field goal in the opening 22 minutes of the game and got nothing else after that. That was enough. Despite some frenzied running by rookie fullback Nick Picciosani, the Lions were unable to sustain drives long enough to catch the Packers and save the holiday. It might be expected that at this stage of the season, the Lions would at least be a smooth functioning unit. Yet, the offense is more off stride than it has been since preseason training. Offside penalties and illegal motion in the backfield balked the Lions in several important situations and ruined their best efforts in the second half. Early in the third period, the Lions were driving desperately for the tying touchdown. Morrill guided an attack which consumed 9 minutes and 59 yards. Yet the Lions yielded the ball without scoring a point. A motion penalty damaged them here. When they regained the ball a few minutes later, an offside penalty spoiled the effort. These were the only two real chances the Lions had in the second half. Green Bay crushed all the other efforts with stout defensive play and 2 pass interceptions off of Morrill. The Lions seemed determined at the outset to give the Packers as little trouble as possible. Green Bay's Jack Butler fumbled the opening kickoff, and Dick LeBeau recovered for Detroit on the 19. Jerry Perry kicked a 22-yard field goal to give the Lions a brief 3-0 lead. The Packers came back smartly, victimizing little Jimmy David on a 65-yard march. All right, here we go. All right, we got here's the Russian here. Petrosani ran 17 times for 134 yards. Earl Morrill 9 for 41. Hopalong Cassidy 10 times for 37 yards. Taylor ran 21 for 41. Horning 5 for 17. Lion defense was always stout, especially against the run. Morrill's completed 13 out of 28. Yale Larry passed once, didn't complete it. 195 yards. Bart Starr was 10 of 15, 169 yards with no interceptions. And he's Gibbons scored 7 passes for 102 yards. Everything very even here. Dowler caught 4 for 107. McGee caught 2. Knefel caught 2. Jimmy Taylor caught 2. All right, so where are we at here? Page 47, column 1. That column 1? Yep. They required only 6 plays. The big game was a 32-yard pass from Starr to Dowler, who skipped around David. Horning scored the touchdown from the 11 by turning right end, faking David to his knees as he skipped untouched into the end zone. Detroit's collapse began with that and continued gruesomely. Terry Barr fumbled the following kickoff, and Ken Beck recovered for Green Bay at the Detroit 18. The Packers were penalized back to the 36, but Starr hit Dowler again as David watched to reach the 6. Horning turned the same end, shaking off David's frantic tackle, and the Packers were ahead 14-3. Late in the first period, we got somebody yelling at the ref. Oh, that's just rude. Last word in all arguments, baseball or football, is had by the officials. And here's a man who gets in a lot of last words. Head linesman Charlie Berry, an American League umpire in the summer, gives the word to Lions center Charlie Ann. Late in the first period, with Morrill being harassed by the jitterbugging Packer line, a late pitch out to Danny Lewis was fumbled at the Detroit 40. Bill Forrester recovered for the Packers. The Lions crushed 3 Packer runs, but Horning followed with a 39-yard field goal to make it 17-3. Morrill, under constant pressure now and being belted on virtually every play by the on-rushing Tom Bettis, Green Bay linebacker, was jolted early in the second period and fumbled at the Detroit 49. Henry Jordan got this one for the Packers. Starr, who connected with 8 of 11 passes in the first half push, completed 3 here to reach the Detroit 18. The Lions held, but with 4th down coming up, Alex Karras threw a fist at the Packers. And the Packers were advanced to the Detroit 8. Imagine that, Alex Karras throwing a punch. Wow. Hard to believe. Jim Taylor scored a moment later from the 1. Way to go, Alex. So instead of, if he didn't throw a punch, you can't get much stupider than that. Didn't throw a punch, maybe the Packers missed the field goal, and they have 7 less points. But the Detroit tragedy almost had another chapter when Ken Webb fumbled the next kickoff, the 5th Lion fumble of the half. Wow. But Jim Martin nabbed this one at the 32. From there, the Lions moved. Petrosani, who wound up with 134 yards rushing, the best day by a Detroit back since 1950, ripped off 15 yards. Hopalong Cassidy got 13. Petrosani got another 12. Then Morrow pitched out to Petrosani for 23 and a first down on the 5. Cassidy scored from there. Detroit's second touchdown came quickly, gaining the ball on their own 47. The Lions used Petrosani for 26 yards in 2 plays. Then Morrow threw to Jerry Reichow for 27 and a score which reduced Green Bay's lead to 24-17. The Lions were coming back fast, and they tried to squeeze another score into the first half, but things began to go awry again. They took too much time on one play, were in motion on another play, forgot to block on a third, and Morrow was hit and fumbled. That one sentence seems to explain the whole season. Lions outgained the Packers 354 to 242. Out first down them 21-12, but true to the code, they also out-fumbled them. All right, let's see here. Go back a couple here, a couple pages here. There we go. All right, I know we got some more here. Okay. Whoops. Oh, my bad. If only the Lions got points for mistakes. If George Wilson got the wishbone Thursday, his wish would be to discover why his Lions play giveaway. I just can't understand it, Wilson said after the Green Bay Packers took an early lead and rode out a 24-7 decision. 24-17, sorry. It's been that way all year. We didn't play badly, but those early mistakes were too much to overcome. You can't give away the ball and expect to win. The Packers scored their second and third touchdowns and their field goal following recovery of fumbles by Terry Barr, Danny Lewis, and Earl Morrall. Another facet of the defeat that particularly irritated Wilson was the number of offsides and illegal procedure penalties called against Detroit. The last thing I did before we went on the field was warn the linemen to watch out for the offsides. They should know better by now. We practice that all the time. 2 of the calls killed a drive just before the half when the Lions were moving well after scoring a pair of touchdowns. 3 more 5-yarders blunted third period threats. Someone came in Wilson's caged in office with the news that the Lions again won this statistical battle. Yes, but for some reason, Wilson said wryly, they don't give you any points for that. One of the few bright spots was the running of Nick Petrosani, used less than half the time this year. The rookie from Notre Dame rushed for 134 yards, the best by any Lion since Bob, not even going to bother, had 198 yards in 1950 against the New York Yankees. Petrosani, pictured there, carried 17 times and was thrown for a loss only once on a wide play. He carried 72 times for 423 yards, nearly double this year's total yards of John Henry Johnson, the second best rusher in 63 attempts. He played very well, said Wilson, in a masterpiece of understatement. Visiting coach Vince Lombardi of the Packers went much stronger. That boy shall be a great one someday. He is very tough to bring down. We tackle poorly, but that doesn't take anything away from Petrosani, Lombardi said. We were lucky to win the game, but there's an old adage in this game. Mistakes can beat you. It certainly was true in the first quarter. We got the breaks and took advantage of them, but after that, we couldn't do anything. Paul Hornung, who scored the first 2 Packer TDs, kicked the extra points, and a field goal, was hurt at the end of the first quarter. He gets hurt. He's always getting hurt. He got a cracked rib, and we couldn't use him after that, Lombardi said. Without Hornung, we didn't have a running game. The Detroit defensive line is really tough to run against. Just then, a familiar voice chimed in. You can block them, but you still don't get them out of the play. It was Red Cochran who mightily enjoyed the victory. Cochran was led out by the Lions last winter as backfield coach and picked up by the Packers for the same job. Oh, what we got here? Trying out his legs after the Packers handcuffed his arm. Earl Morrall gallops 11 yards before Bill Quinlan catches him from behind. Jesse Whittington left and Bill Forrester race in to help Quinlan. And here, Taylor made. Green Bay fullback Jim Taylor didn't let Dave Witzel's hand on his face guard stop him. He barged into the end zone from the 1 for the third Packer touchdown. Oh, yeah. So our boys were very tired in the second half, playing last Sunday, and then today took a lot out of them, said Lombardi in defense of the dull second half. Wilson wouldn't use tiredness as an excuse. These are young men. There's no reason why they shouldn't be tired, why they should be tired. That isn't what lost the game, Wilson said. Wilson allowed that Jimmy David had a bad day. Horny faked David beautifully en route to his 2 touchdowns, and several damaging passes were completed in his territory, and quickly passed on to Earl Morrall. Tobin wrote question. Earl was moving the club, so there was no sense in changing, Wilson said. Asked if Rote figures in next year's plans. Wilson answered, I don't know what his plans are. Johnson, like Rote, didn't get into the game. Wilson said it was the same thing. No sense in switching because Petrosani was doing so well. Yeah. Jerry Reichow engaged in a continuing clash with linebacker Bill Forrester. He hooked me when I was going up for a pass, Reichow explained. Forrester cleanly took Reichow out of another pass play, but no penalty was called, and they went at it again late in the game. But Reichow made a tactical error. He grabbed Forrester in front of the Packer bench. They got reinforcements in awfully fast, Reichow grinned. Jim Hurd of Albany College was a guest of the Packers and sat on their bench. Hurd was drafted by Green Bay last year and will report next summer. Some of the best passing in Briggs Stadium this season was in the pregame show by 13-year-old Joe Spada of the Detroit Cannon Tars to end Bill Whalen. Nothing worked for the Lions. The elevator to the press box got stuck in the second half at the second deck. All right, and we got a little bit more here, I do believe. All right. Okay. As of today, 1,000 pardons, Earl, but you're not number one. Strictly personal, I'm not denying that Earl Morrall of the Lions is a fine young quarterback with great promise. But when the NFL's own statistical bureau ranks him as the finest passer in the star-studded league, there's too much sage in the dressing room for that comfortable feeling. Is he greater than Johnny Unitas of the Colts, Y.A. Tittle of the 49ers, Charlie Connolly of the Giants, and super passers of that class? The league says yes. But only because of the weird yardstick being used to measure such things. For some strange reason, the league rates its passers on the average number of yards gained for every pass that is thrown. Not for every pass completed, mind you, just the ones he throws. When Earl faced the Green Bay Packers to work up an appetite for Thanksgiving Day dinner, he had thrown 77 passes and gained 676 yards. That averaged out just 8.78 yards every pass he flipped, and supposedly made him a man of distinction. That he completed only 35 of those 77 for a 45.5 completion percentage and he pitched only 2 touchdown strikes, made no difference. He still topped everyone in the league, including the incomparable Unitas, who has completed 51% of his 280 passes, gained 2,274 yards, and has been directly responsible for 24 aerial touchdowns. It's silly but true, and the number one reason a new yardstick definitely is needed to replace one that measures nothing but tries to make it sound important. All right, so that is the Detroit Free Press. Now let's go to the Saginaw News. Where are we at here? Saginaw News. The November 27th, 1959 edition of the Saginaw News. Lions Nick Petrosani plunges for gain. Detroit Turkey groggy. Packers thump stumbling Lions 24-17. Thanksgiving Day comes but once a year, but Detroit fans have had a turkey on their hands all season long. The Lions playing giveaway while the opposition plays football made it 7 defeats against only 2 victories and a tie yesterday by dropping their annual Thanksgiving Day contest to the Green Bay Packers 24-17. Now they may be headed for their worst season in 11 years unless they can beat either the Chicago Cardinals or the Chicago Bears in their final 2 starts, which they will. They'll beat the Cardinals. The Lions fumbled themselves into 3 Green Bay scores yesterday before 49,221 of the faithful and hearty and a nationwide television audience that saw all the scoring and most of the excitement crammed into the first half. The futility of the season was illustrated in the second half when the Lions, trailing by 1 touchdown, could not get inside the Green Bay 25-yard line, although they had the ball for twice as many plays as did the Packers. This was the 9th game in the holiday series, the 53rd between the clubs, and the first time in a dozen seasons the Packers have scored a season sweep. They beat the Lions earlier this season in Green Bay 28-10. This time they had so much help from the Lions they could hardly miss. The Lions moved in front 3-0 on a Jerry Perry's 22-yard field goal that followed a Green Bay fumble on the opening kickoff. The Packers then drove 65 yards in 6 plays for 1 score, got another 95 seconds later following a Detroit fumble, ended a field goal and led 17-3 before the Thanksgiving stay at Homer's started to work on their second drumstick. The Lions fumbled again in the second period, and the Packers promptly moved 49 yards in 8 plays for a 24-3 lead. 2 long drives got the long-suffering Detroit club back into contention, but it lacked the stuff to keep its offense rolling. 2 late interceptions killed off hopes for a deadlock. Paul Hornung scored all but 6 of the Green Bay points, despite the fact he suffered a cracked rib and carried the ball only 5 times. Hornung scored the Packers' first 2 touchdowns on runs of 11 and 6 yards and carried the ball only 3 other times because of his first period injury. He booted a 39-yard field goal and kicked all 3 extra points, though. The Packers picked up only 73 yards on the ground and lost the statistical battle to the Lions by a wide margin. 354 to 242, well, 112 yards. But quarterback Bart Starr hit with deadly and timely accuracy on his passes. He completed 10 out of 15 for 169 yards and didn't suffer an interception. Boyd Dowler, a gangling rookie from Colorado, snared 4 of Starr's passes for 107 yards. Here's the unhappy sequence that brought about yesterday's defeat. Green Bay fumbles opening kickoff. Perry kicks field goal. 4 plays later, Detroit leads 3-0. Packers march 65 yards in 6 plays. Starr hitting Dowler with a 32-yarder for a big gainer, and Hornung scores from the 11 after losing halfback Jimmy David on a dandy fake. Packers lead 7-3. Terry Barr fumbles kickoff. Green Bay recovers at the Detroit 18. Packers penalized to the 36, but Starr quickly hits Dowler for 30 yards to the 6. Hornung scores, shaking off David at the line of scrimmage. Green Bay up 14-3. Late in the period, Danny Lewis fumbles at the Detroit 39, and Bill Forrester of Green Bay recovers. 4 plays later, Horning kicks field goal. Now it's 17-3. Early in the second quarter, Earl Morrall fumbles. Henry Jordan recovers for Green Bay. 8 plays later, fullback Jimmy Taylor crashes over from the 1. Green Bay now leads 24-3. Lions bounce back as they have done so many times this season, but there wasn't enough bounce in the club, and it had to settle for 2 touchdowns, one on Hopalong Cassidy's 5-yard run and the other on Morrall's 27-yard pass to Jerry Reichow. Morrall went all the way at quarterback, and Coach George Wilson said Reichow will remain a flanker back the rest of the year. That move means that Barr, whose work as a defensive back displeased his coach, will be a second stringer on offense. Lions meet the Cardinals in the last home game of the season on Sunday, December 6th. And there's the league right there, standings. All right, where are we at here? Oh. Here we go. Shake-up brewing in the Lions ranks. Some top-level changes involving both the coaching staff and the administration are brewing within the Detroit Lions organization. The Associated Press learned today that Edwin J. Anderson may be on his way out as the president. Some changes are anticipated on the 6-man coaching staff, and they involve head coach George Wilson. It was learned that the directors, unhappy with the club's 2-7-1 record, are prepared to settle in one way or another what one source called troubles that have been bothering us for some time. The source high in the Detroit football company made it clear that many of the directors are unhappy with the way Anderson has handled the club since he took over as president general manager in July 1958. They became particularly dismayed earlier this week with the disclosure that quarterback Tobin Rote may be playing his last season in Detroit because Anderson failed to sign him to a new contract. Instead, Rote elected to play out his option, in other words, living up to last year's contract for another season rather than signing a new pact. The option clause is standard in the National Football League. Thus, the Lions could lose Rote's services and get nothing in return if the brawny veteran chooses to play in the American Football League or in the Canadian Football League, or just retire. The source said Anderson was instructed to sign Rote. Anderson said the two could not come to a written agreement because of Rote's demands for a locked-in contract, but assured the other club owners that he had a gentleman's agreement with the player. There have been wide differences of opinion in the Lions official family for some time, and some of the directors have locked horns with Anderson on internal matters. The source said that Anderson antagonized the man in the street and broke the spirit of the club with statements earlier this season that we didn't have any quarterbacking. Anderson has been in the public eye practically all season. He has volunteered himself as a candidate to succeed the late Bert Bell as commissioner of the National Football League. And time after time, he has backed up his coach. Excuse me. Backed up his coach and declared at every turn that Wilson will be back next season, even if we don't win another game. Oof. Despite the repeated votes of confidence, Wilson's job may be in jeopardy. The source said there are far too many differences of opinion on the coaching staff. Changes must be made. He said those changes would come after the season, but indicated that others might be coming sooner. Lyle Fife and William D. Downey would have the inside track on the president's job should Anderson be ousted. Like Anderson, both are members of the group that purchased the Lions in 1948. Fife was the club's first president. So there's a little dissension going on there. So things aren't all sunshine and roses, shall we say. Yeah, a very, very, very disappointing season. All right, and finally, let's wrap things up here. All right, we got the Green Bay Press-Gazette. So let's go to the November 27th edition of the Green Bay Press-Gazette. All right. Packers start fast, then hang on to win 24-17. That's the Taylor touchdown right here. And here's a Horning touchdown. Some touchdowns come easy and some don't, as shown. In panel at the left, Packer Paul Horning jukes a Lion out of his shoes and goes 11 yards for a touchdown in the first quarter. At right, Jimmy Taylor gets the helmet twist from Witzel and a bump from an unidentified Lion and blasting a yard for the Packers' third TD in the second quarter. Green Bay won the nationally televised game in Detroit. It was viewed by more than 50 million people. Wow. We're going back 1959. We're going close to 70 years we're going back. So 50 million people. That's a big audience. Big audience. Let's start right here. Nearly 3,000 fans ignoring snow and chilling 22-degree temperatures swamped Austin Straubel Field to cheer the Packers as a United Airlines plane landed late Thursday afternoon following the 24-17 victory over the Detroit Lions. Head coach Vince Lombardi and his players were saluted with signs, whistles, and ringing cheers as they filed from the plane and wended their way to the terminal waiting room. Lombardi, flashing a wide grin, told the crowd, "Well, we've won 3 more games than I had expected to win. With 2 more to go, we're still in there and anything can happen." The rousing welcome precipitated one of the biggest traffic jams in the history of the airport. It was nearly 45 minutes, despite 2 lanes of outgoing traffic, before the congestion was eased. "I wonder," somebody said, "what would happen if they would ever won the championship." Well, they'd find that out in 1961. All right. Relax after taking a 24-3 edge on the Lions. The Packers went on a point-a-minute scoring rampage, relaxing to the point of danger, and then turned on a defensive heat to defeat the Lions in a thriller chiller in Briggs Stadium Thanksgiving Day. Final score was Green Bay 24, Detroit 17. It was the 5th victory for Vince Lombardi and his fighting stalwarts, and that represents a major reconstruction miracle in view of the club's 1 win from a year ago. This was particularly juicy because the bitterly fought holiday feature was witnessed by some 50 million folks via television across the land, not to mention 49,221 in the flesh. It was the first time Green Bay had whipped Detroit twice in the same season since back in 1947. And it was the Pack's 2nd win in 5 days, setting the record at 5-5. The Packers can now sit back and contemplate the possibilities for the 2-game West Coast windup. The Rams on December 6th and the 49ers on December 13th. Green Bay still has a chance for a first-place tie, providing the Packers win 2, the Colts and the 49ers each lose 2, and the Bears drop 1. Well, that was not meant to be. That was not going to happen. The 49ers would lose 2. The Packers would win 2. Bears would not drop any, and the Colts would not drop any. So all the points were scored in the first half, with the Bays leading 17-3 at the end of period 1. It was 24-3 with 6:51 gone, as you can see right there, right? So they scored, and then they scored that to make it 24. And then the Lions scored their 14, and basically that was it. The whole second half, nothing. The Lions scored 2 DDs in the next 7 minutes to end the scoring. Getting 24 points in 21 minutes and 51 seconds, the Packers appeared to be headed for a runaway, but the Lions ripped 68 yards and 6 rushes for 1 TD and worked a 27-yard aerial for another. The Packers seemed to relax during the spree, but they snapped out of it in time, and the motors penetrated as far as the Packer 31 just once the rest of the day. Bart Starr started his 2nd straight game at quarterback for the Bays and scored his 2nd victory in a row, starting with a 21-0 triumph over Washington. He played in the game before that too, so he didn't start in his 2nd straight game. I believe he started against the Colts as well too. But He completed 8 out of 11 passes for 164 yards, and a few, if any, were wasted. Star's major point weapon was Paul Hornung, who was just short of being fantastic and furnishing his famed golden touch. Golden Boy played a full steam for only 6 minutes, but came out of the game with 18 points, one more than the Detroit's entire total. He scored the first TD on a shifty 11-yard run at 4:48 of the first quarter. Less than 2 minutes later, Hornung juked 6 yards for a second TD. He kicked both points for 14 point afters for a total of 14 points at that particular time. Just before the second TD, Hornung got a rib badly bruised and he could barely breathe. He couldn't carry it after that TD, but returned at 14:59 in the first frame to boot a 39-yard field goal for a personal total of 17 points and a 17-3 Packer edge. He scored number 18 after Jim Taylor's 1-yard plunge early in the second period to set the score at 24-3. Hornung missed adding 3 more when he was wide with a field goal try from the 32-yard line in the fourth period. After the fat edge, the Packers went conservative and counted just 2 first downs in the last 38 minutes of the game. Wow, the whole rest of the game, almost final 40 minutes, they had 2 first downs. Whew. And yet the Packers had a chance to sew it up with 10 points in the fourth period. Hornung's missed field goal and Taylor's fumble into the end zone from the Lion 2-yard line. Wow. Packers got a few breaks, with 2 interceptions from Bill Forrester and John Simak, and 3 fumble recoveries from Ken Beck, Henry Jordan, and Bill Forrester. But the Lions got the eveners when Hornung and linebacker Tom Bettis, who calls the defensive signals, went out with injuries. The Lions won the statistical chiefly because the Packers couldn't rush against the Lions' fast defensive line, and selling for 73 yards, 23 in the last half. The Lions had 354 total yards, including 190 yards rushing, while the Pack had grand total of 242 yards. The Bays had only 3 first downs rushing against Detroit's 13 on the ground. Big Nick Petrosani got 134 yards rushing in 17 trips, almost double what the Packers had on the ground. Green Bay had 169 yards in the air, and that saved the day. Starr was practically perfect and easily could have had 12 out of 15 except for 2 drops. Long Boyd Dowler gobbled up 4 passes for 107 yards of Green Bay's air yards and was swindled out of a 5th catch when Joe Schmidt rode on Dowler's back on another catch and shook the ball loose. It should have been interference. A 32-yard catch by Dowler figured in the first TD, and a 30-yarder set off the second. Max McGee, who caught 2, helped the third TD march off with a 21-yard catch. Gary Knafel and Taylor each caught 2. This game didn't have a pleasant beginning. Wisconsin-wise, Billy Butler fumbled the opening kickoff, and the Lions had it on the Packer 19. The Bay defense was tough, so the Lions settled for a 3-0 edge at 1:29 on Jerry Perry's 22-yard field goal. Starr killed that in a hurry with a 65-yard TD drive. Starr's first pass went to Dowler down the middle, and the lanky lad stepped off 32 yards. After a couple of Taylor and Hornung runs, Starr worked a 9-yard pass to Knafel, and at the same time, Alex Karras stepped on a Packer. The roughing penalty set the Bays on the Lion 11. From that point, Hornung shook off Jim David and dove in for a 7-3 edge. Terry Barr fumbled on the next kickoff return, and Beck recovered on the Lion 18. A personal foul on the first play set the Packer drive in motion back on the 36. On second down, Dowler fought down to the 6 after taking Starr's throw. With Fuzzy Thurston blocking, Hornung zoomed around right end with a good juke and scored to make the score 14-3. After an exchange of punts in which Norm Masters almost blocked Larry's boot, Forrester recovered a fumble on the Detroit 40. Taylor and Don McElhaney were held to 8 yards. Turn to page 18, column 7. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7. Horning was good on his field goal from the 39 of the last play of the period. Lions put together 2 first downs, but Morrill lost the handle when hit by Dave Hanner, and Jordan recovered on the Detroit 49. Starr started pitching and hit McGee twice, once for 21 and the other time on a fine catch for 9, down to the 17. With Taylor gaining 7 in 2 carries, Starr arched a beauty to McElhaney, who ran in for a touchdown from the 12, but the Bays only had 6 men on a line of scrimmage, and the penalty killed it. Starting back in the 17, Taylor made 6 and then lost 2 on a pass. Karras took a dislike to Taylor and mauled him, reducing a nifty 15-yard penalty down to the 8. McElhaney cracked the right side for 9 down to the 1, and Taylor then cracked over it for a 24-3 lead at 6:51. Packers had the ball for only 9 plays the rest of the second period, including 2 punts, while the Lions had it for 20 plays. Petrosani, Cassidy, and Morrill lugged the leather in the Lions' 68-yard, 6-play TD drive. The big gains were 16 and 11 by Petrosani, 13 by Cassidy, 23 by Morrill, and of course a 5-yard TD jab by Cassidy at 8:11 of the second period. The Lions next moved 53 yards in 4 plays. Petrosani went 26 yards in 2 trips, and on Morrill's second pass to Jerry Reichow, took the ball behind Hank Reminger on the Packer 5 and waltzed in, completing a 27-yard play. That sets the score at 24-17. Detroit worked the ball to midfield just before the half, where Jim Martin had the distance for a 55-yard field goal, but was off to the left. The Lions froze the ball for 9 minutes and 2 seconds to start the second half, but got 0 points. The key Packer play saw Bettis and Forrester pinch Morrill for an 11-yard loss, and the losers finally gave up the ball on the Packers 30 on downs. I don't know why they didn't try to kick a field goal, but Lions got frisky again with 2 first downs to midfield, but Forrester got Morrill for a 13-yard loss, and the punt was on. Forrester at this point moved into Bettis' spot at the middle linebacker when Tom was hurt and Ray Nitschke worked in Forrester's outside spot across from Dan Curry. Packers started something on the last play of the third period when Gary Knethel took Starr's throw for a 19-yard gain out to the Packer 37. Starr and Dowler followed with a 36-yard aerial to the Detroit 27, and the Bays seemed on their way. The attack backfired, and Horning missed his field goal try. After an exchange of punts, Forrester intercepted Morrill's pass on the Detroit 40 and crashed all the way down to the 7, where the Packers were really in business. Taylor made 3 and McElhaney made 1 before Taylor hit the left side and fumbled, the ball going into the end zone where Bill Glass recovered. Taking over on their own 20 with 5:20 left, the Lions got spunky. Morrill lateraled to Petrosani for 25 yards out to the 44 and then passed to Gibbons to the Packer 46. Simak came to the rescue on a first down play by intercepting on the 24-yard line and returning it out to midfield. That seemed like the victory, but the Lions got one more chance. Taylor exchanged a 5-yard gain and a 5-yard loss, but then no interference was called on Schmidt's handling of Dowler. The Lions started again from the 20 with 1 minute 40 seconds left to go. The Bays came up with a fierce rush on Morrill, and he was off on the first 2. On third, Nitschke made a key deflection, and on 4th down, Larry passed off a fake punt, but a lineman was illegally downfield on the incompletion. Starr then killed the last 1 minute and 15 seconds on line smacks, and the turkey tasted great Thursday night. I love that. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Lions Wilson defends his third quarter gamble for a touchdown. Detroit Lions big George Wilson, baffled but unbowed, stoutly defended his losing go-for-broke gamble in the third quarter of Thursday's traditional holiday production against the Packers. With the Lions in arrears 24-17 late in the third quarter and confronted by a 4th down and 12 situation on the Packer 31. I mean, Jesus, come on, man. 4th and 12 and you go for it. I mean, unbelievable. They looked for the sidelines, waiting for Wilson to dispatch Jim Martin and his field goal unit colleagues. Standard procedure at this distance in the National Football League. Yep. Sometimes you can just outcoach yourself. But the nod wasn't forthcoming. George signaled quarterback Earl Morrill to go. 4th and 7, 152. Let's go for it. I think we got a shot at this one. Oh, my goodness. Morrill retreated and sighted in on Hopalong Cassidy off to his left and 20 yards downfield. He was badly rushed, however, and his pass nosedived into the turf, far short of its mark, ending what was to be the Lions' last big scoring chance. Can't get much stupider than that. Shrugging off the second guess, Wilson pointed out it would have been about a 37-yard field goal, which is a hit or miss proposition for us, at least this year. Another thing, the guy that got hurt for the Packers Horning missed one from the 31. We're still 7 points behind, too, remember. If we happen to go into score, we're all tied up, George noted, and our team gets a hell of a big lift. Of course, if we'd been down around the 20, we would have gone for the field goal. A play that just preceded this much debated but a Detroit press decision might have been an even bigger one for the Packers GM coach Vince Lombardi conceded. Detroit, threatening to wipe out the Packers' precarious lead, had 2nd down and 13 on the Packers' 32 and appeared on an irresistible march. The situation called for drastic measures, and they were forthcoming. Defensive captain Bill Bubba Forrester and Tom Bettis, who subsequently was injured, stormed through to drop Morrill, attempting to pass for an 11-yard loss back on the Packer 43. He next hit Cassidy with a 12-yard pitch down to the 31, setting up that 4th down gamble. It was those early fumbles, as much as they contretemps, that undermined the Lions, Wilson felt, declaring, "It's tough when a team gets a big lead on you like that. But it's the same story I've been telling for 10 games this year," George said wearily. We get a drive going and we fumble. We get another drive going and we have an interception. I don't know why we do it, but it's been our trouble all year. Lions, it was ventured, had contained the Packers' running game with more success than any other opponent to date. They ran pretty good against us on the scoring plays, the former Chicago Bear and Sid Riley, and that's what counts. That's 24 points you have to get back. Reciprocating, he evinced respect for the Packers defense, insisting it has played well for them all year, and revealing that we changed our blocking the second half on account of Bettis, a frequent visitor to the Detroit backfield. He was not, Wilson said, at all surprised at the pass-catching performance of the Packers' brilliant rookie Boyd Dowler. We were very high on Dowler in the draft last January. George said we were hoping to get a shot at him, but we couldn't afford to draft him 1-2 because we needed so much help in other places. Had he thought of using Tobin Mote, the former Packers, at quarterback? Yes, I thought of it, George admitted, but the other kid, Morrill, was doing pretty well. So, wrote reportedly having an off year, has sat out the Lions' last 2 games. Tobes had a number of different things wrong with him this season, Wilson added, by way of explanation. He's been hurt nearly all year long. Lombardi, reveling in the luxury of 2 victories within 5 days, expressed pleasure with the Packers' offensive artistry in the first 20 minutes, but that was it. He advanced 2 reasons for the abrupt drop-off. We lost Horning. He played only the first quarter, he said, and both teams were very, very tired in the second half. Horning, who had scored all the Packers 17 points in the opening quarter, suffered a rib injury that limited his future appearances to the place-kicking chores. Surprisingly, Lombardi didn't blame playing 2 games within the same space of 4 days. It's actually 4 days, he said, for the combatants' fatigue. It's in how you approach the game, Vince insisted. We made a mistake in the practicing Monday and Tuesday. All the same, he felt the Packers should have scored in the second half after the promising start. We got all the breaks in the beginning, he admitted, but we wasted some golden opportunities. That pass to McGee right on the goal line, the field goal Horning missed, and Taylor's fumble into the end zone from the 2-yard line in the fourth quarter. In this connection, he pronounced himself very, very well satisfied with the performance of Bart Starr, a winner for the second straight game, and the second time in his pro career. Bart played a very fine ball game. He found another phase less pleasing. We tackled very poorly. The Packer boss declared, although we didn't let 2, 3, 4. We didn't let them make the big play, fortunately. Conceding that the Lions were a lot tougher than they were the first time we played them, Lombardi paid them high tribute, asserting that's the best defensive line we faced. How has the 2-game winning streak affected his evaluation of the upcoming season-ending invasion of the West Coast? Lombardi, who never has coached a loser, shot back with a grin. I'd like to finish with 6-6. I'll tell you that. If you fellas don't expect 8-4 next season. Speaking of the future, he and business manager Jack Vanissi left today for Philadelphia to get ready for the NFL's annual draft meeting opening Monday. The Packers' fast getaway, though it may have differed from the script, was exactly what they'd had in mind. A deeply contented Bart Starr reported in a noisy, relaxed dressing room. We figured we'd have to score to win, Bart let it be known, because their defense has been carrying them all year. Then, of course, their offense got steamed up today, and we were lucky to come out without scoring in the second half. He added with a grin. That will make Thanksgiving nice. John Simak, the Florida Bantam, who preserved the victory with an 11th-hour interception, said, it felt good to finally get my hands on that ball, simultaneously noting we played a good second half defensively. Hard-nosed Ray Nitschke, who made his first sustained appearance of the season after relieving the injured Bettis late in the third quarter, and admitted, I like to hit him, but I missed some too. Horning, still wincing with pain, was disgusted over having to miss the last 3 quarters despite that 17-point flurry. That doesn't make any difference if you can't play, said the former Notre Dame great. You've got to play. Bettis, holding a painfully right knee, didn't know it happened. I just stayed in for 2 more series, he added, but it was going out on me. Another casualty, Fred Fuzzy Thurston, propping a swollen left leg on a pillow, reported, I've got a sprained ankle. I was blocking a linebacker and somebody fell on it. Happened in the third quarter. I should be all right in a few days now. It's probably just sore from playing on it. Still another Jim Temp, displayed a pair of raw, bleeding hands and confided, I've never had so many chunks of meat taken out of me in one game in my life. This discovery marred his joy only fleetingly. Looking to the future, he declared, we'll be tough on the coast like we've never been tough before. A subdued Rote, dressing quietly in the Lions' quarters, admitted he'd had his troubles, a bad shoulder, a broken left thumb, and a twisted knee. But I could have played the last couple of weeks. I've just been sitting there, he said bitterly. What about the future? I'm playing out my option, which ends this season, Tobin said, but I don't know whether I'll retire. If Detroit doesn't give me the contract I want, I may go to Houston in the new league. Ooh. With that, Rote volunteered, I think I'll go to the north and get me a buck deer. The Lions, like the Packers, are idle until next Tuesday. A pair of former Packers now living in Detroit visited the dressing room after the game. over the big victory with Dr. H.S. Atkinson, Packer team physician, exploded. I thought that game would never end. Jeez, man, what the heck? All right, well, okay, that was it. That game would never end. All right, so there you go. So, tough loss for the Lions. Good win for the Packers. You know, it's a game of mistakes, and especially back in those days, you'd be mad. I mean, like nowadays, you might have, every now and then you might have some games where a team gives up 3 or 4, or maybe turnovers. Turnovers are huge now. They try to keep them down to a minimum. Back then, they happen quite a bit more than obviously they do nowadays. But so the Packers got a bunch of turnovers and capitalized on them, and just another tough loss for the Detroit Lions. And the Packers would go on to win the final 2 games of the 1959 season and finish with a record of 7-5. And for the 1957 NFL champion Detroit Lions, this 1959 season couldn't end soon enough. So that's the way it was on this date, November 26th, Thanksgiving Day, 1959, between the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions at Briggs Stadium in pro football's first 50 years. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.